Okay. Hello, everyone. We've started recording now because we know a lot of people are working during this time, so won't be able to make it. But I'd like to welcome everyone to our latest AMA. This time it will be with our founding CTO, Conrad Whelan. For those who have already read his intro article, you'll probably know a little bit more about him. He was the very first full-time engineer at Uber. And after exiting in 2016, he took a semi-retirement to decompress, which for Conrad meant doing a lot of skiing, some investing and advisory work, and a little bit of philanthropy on the side. I can't do that. If you've got a passion for robotic loudspeaker technology or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you'll get along very much with Conrad. So now he's come out of retirement to join Nillion as our CTO. He's been nose deep in the work, taking Dr. Miguel's mathematical invention and engineering into reality with our dev team, our amazing dev team that is ever expanding. And he's here with us now to really answer some of your guys' questions that you've all been asking for many weeks now. I know he's been a much requested person. So thank you, Conrad. It's really great to have you here with us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Amazing. So we'll just jump straight into the questions. We've got a couple of people here now. People will be flooding in for the rest of the hour like we normally do, but let's kick off with some of the questions from some of the people in here now. So from the crypto geologist, he asked, will the NMC protocol solely be for Nillion network, or will there come a time when NMC will power other networks, public or private?
So the intention with what we're building is the underlying mathematical protocol of NMC built into a decentralized network and all bound together with a Nillion token. So this token will be used both for people to earn by staking with nodes that they own, have put onto the network that perform computations, supply blinding factors for storage, and so on and so forth. And as well, the token will be used for payment. So it'll just sort of be like a little ecosystem based around the token. The intention here will be to build a fully decentralized network that is like a large pool of decentralized and information theoretic secure private compute. What does that mean? Well, I think it's almost similar to if you think about the Lambda architectures for AWS, where you're storing data within an S3 bucket, and then you are running a Lambda function, whether one time or regularly on that data. You don't actually care where that Lambda function is being run, which compute node it's being run. That's all sort of taken care of by the platform. I envision that there's going to be something similar with the Nillion network in NMC. So the intention is to build a large pool of compute that might work for every sort of single use case and workload. That being said, in the future, it's entirely possible that there will be workloads that are going to require a large amount of sort of differentiated compute on the back, like put onto the back end. So I'm thinking maybe there might be some data science or computational science. We talk about potentially like medical research, over very large data sets. And perhaps those would require a specific type of computing backend. I can think of maybe GPUs, some sort of vectorized engines. Will those be a different network though? I mean, maybe it's possible, although I think the idea will be to build those into the larger network. So if people put those sorts of resources on, they get to be used by the entire NMC using community. So.
That's amazing. It's amazing. But leading on into that, we had a question from someone called Luciferus who says, do we have this technology patented? I assume if everything works as expected, there'll be lots of copycats. It could be hard to keep an advantage in this case. So
yeah, definitely patents for these kinds of things are super important. We are working on patents. Yes, I believe those have been filed. I'm not sure. That's Dr. Miguel's department. I think the important thing to note here is that what we're trying to do is mathematical. So the patents are incredibly important because there's only so many ways that you can formulate the math that actually work. And in fact, typically there's only one way. So we will definitely patent that. As to copycats, I think the idea is, and this is probably the most exciting thing about the new decentralized worldview. The idea is we're building a network for everyone. not just for people that are paying for services, but also for other people to become part of the protocol and earn off those services. If we get that right, we want it to actually be lucrative for people to just passively put compute onto the network and be able to earn from that, and make make it it's more beneficial for somebody that wants to use this technology to just participate in the larger network than it would be to sort of build their own. The other thing that's really helping us, from this sort of copycat type phenomenon is these things are incredibly difficult. It's incredibly complex. What Miguel has written, securing it, rolling it out properly, these things are going to be, really, really difficult for us to get. And I think, for somebody to just sort of copy it, that's, I guess it's possible. Humans are amazing. They do amazing stuff. But I think, patenting it, working hard to get our own version out, and then making sure that it's an inclusive resource, useful for, once again, all members of the community who both do private computation as well as to earn from that network is what's going to be the most important thing to help us in this regard.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because moving from the patent, someone else has asked, what is the vision in terms of openness for the project? Will it be open source, for instance, parts of it, all of it, etc.? What is it looking like potentially in the future for us?
Yeah, so I think I'm a huge fan of open source, and I actually was reading somewhere that said the most interesting innovation of the blockchain is that it has now taken the open source paradigm and combined it with a shared open data. So there's the ledger, and it's sort of shared between everyone. There's no one person that owns it. So I think open sourcing our reference implementation is going to be incredibly important for Nillion. I think, the timelines upon which we do that, maybe, we need to get our patents taken care of. We need to make sure that our development path is good. And then we need, I think we're going to need a working network. And then we're going to be probably putting a couple of reference implementations out there for other people to sort of hack on and play with and use. I think the key thing with these systems is that we have protocol compliance, meaning like the network both polices itself. So if there are people that are, tweaking and adjusting the implementation that they've put on the network, that we can actually catch it and make sure people aren't being penalized for their staking on their node for the wrong thing. So, but this is also important for ensuring that the protocol maintains the security guarantees that we want to give, and that the computation that people are performing have the level of correctness, which is, sort of absolutely important. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of open source. I will push for us to open source stuff as we go along. I think that's the way all software, should be written in this day and age, for sure.
Yeah, it's So just moving on that with the open source or the patented level, people want to know, will data in the network be stored indefinitely, or can we expect it to expire at some point? He says, I assume that the storage retirement for the node could get huge if it does not expire.
This is a really great question. This is something that we are actually actively talking about right now. What's interesting when you get into the algorithm is once you have a piece of data that's been particleized or Horcruxed into the masked particle, that data is totally portable. So we'll be able to store it in any number of different backends on the system. People will be able to back it up to their laptop. Like, they can basically do whatever they want with it. They could share it to somebody else. They could throw it in S3 if they want. They can basically put it on their Google Drive. It doesn't really matter. So that the data particle storage is something that, yes, we will provide that in the network, but there's going to be many other options for people. What is critical is the network controlling access to the blinding factors. So the idea is if you use a certain set of blinding factors to particleize a piece of data, and then let's say 6 months in the future, you want to run a computation. So perhaps you have particleized public and private keys. You'd like to sign a transaction with those at 6 months, or perhaps delegate somebody else to sign a transaction with those keys. That operation will need the blinding factors that were originally used to particleize that data. So the access to those blinding factors is, I think that's going to be what people are going to be paying for within our sort of token payment model, which we're still working on. We haven't fully sussed it all out. And the question there is going to be, well, is there going to be a way for people to pay for access to those blinding factors until the end of time forever? It's obviously a bigger logistical challenge for us, or sorry, a bigger technical challenge for us as we build this. Or are we going to make it so that there's like a default expiry? So, you know, maybe you have blinding factors for a year or a month or a week, or, you know, there's all sorts of things here to talk about. You know, the other thing we are also talking about internally is, you know, we're looking at storage use cases. How do we want to generate blinding factors for those? Is that different from a compute use case where the blinding factors are pretty much ready to go right away? How much will it cost for you to say do storage and compute with a time between them? Maybe is it going to be cheaper if they happen right together, because that's like technically more easy for us to accomplish? So yeah, in answer to the original question, this is undecided, but you know, access to blinding factors is the important thing. And in order for the network to maintain access to those for a longer period of time, it's going to be technically more challenging. And thus, I think it might actually be more expensive. But I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, that's, you know, just encoded in how much you pay for using blinding factors for a given piece of data. So maybe if you're going to do a compute on it right away, maybe it costs very little. But if you're going to store it for the longer term, maybe it's going to, the network will charge more for that. So I think, yeah, my thoughts there.
No, that's really interesting. And obviously for us, security is an incredibly important thing. It's one of the pillars. So one of the questions is, Nillion assumes that 2/3 of nodes are honest in order for the results of the computation to be trusted. The implication that if they have fewer than that, the results of the computation might be untrustworthy. Does the same apply for the security of the data? Is it hidden by ITS? But can data be exposed to X percentage attack, for example?
Yeah, so I think, yeah, this is a great question. So I mean, even though we're talking storage, we're talking compute, like we're talking data, we're talking output, you know, these things. Fundamentally, what it all gets down to are the blinding factors. So when you say for a computation to be trusted, it's the nodes with the blinding factors that are participating in the computation that need to be trusted. In the same way, when you are storing a piece of data, it's the nodes that provide the blinding factors that need to be trusted. So I think, you know, these are kind of the same thing. And it's going to be the same security guarantee, which I think is good. If there were all of a sudden two different attack vectors based on different aspects of the storage or the computation, that would be much more difficult. But no, I think it's the same thing.
Okay, perfect. I'll move on from some of the tech questions while people try and digest everything you've just said in the last 13 minutes. So
those are my favorite ones. Yeah.
Oh, we can hit you with another one if you want. There's a real doozy that we've got from someone called Polo that says, so what intrigues me is the enrollment process for full nodes, especially the DHS score. I understand why it's here as opposed to cryptography where you can break it with enough computing power. Here you would need nodes, collusion, or Sybil attacks to exploit the protocol, hence the need for some basic checks on node operators. What I'm wondering is what degree it could undermine the permissionless aspect claimed by Nillion. It would still be technically permissionless in the sense that every node is accepted, but if a centralized party is able to rank the nodes based on subjective factors, thus impacting their role in the network, it feels not so permissionless.
So this is a really great question. Thanks to Paulo. I was talking to Tristan about this. It's really kind of cool stuff. And actually, some of this is actually where I think the most interesting thinking is about, like, we're calling it the pathway to permissionless. So this is the way that we're going to roll out the network to eventually get to that like fully decentralized permissionless scheme. But if I'm thinking about this question to be more specific to this question. So there's what we talk about internally is NHS. So that's Node Health Score, and DSS, which is DAO Service Score. These are two sort of different concepts. These have been put into the white paper. I think NHS will stay around. It's going to be interesting if DSS, as we progress in our development, continues to be a concept. So the node health score, your NHS, your node health score, those are all the functions that are, I think in the question it says here, these are subjective factors. These are actually, this node health score is actually going to be objective factors. So we're going to be things like latency, things like throughput, how many functions a given node can participate in at any given time, correctness, so as a node returning the correct results. There's a number of these sort of objective factors that'll go into this node health score. And then the DAO service score, DSS, the conceptualization of this is that this is a rating that Nillion gives to an organization, which then gives it the ability to run a full node on the Nillion network. I think in the early days, we will probably have a permission network because, we're going to be debugging and running. We'll probably have nodes that are running with partners, whether they're like people that have invested in us. I think university institutions, this will be quite a lot like, I see it's almost like the way DNS works is there's like root servers, and then there's a number of like servers below that, but like, the root servers, the ownership is sort of moved around. So nobody actually owns the entire thing or can control the entire thing. But in the future, I think it's totally possible getting it as we get into, we're going to be pushing towards, like, we're going to be following this pathway to get towards permissionless. The idea is that there's going to have to be the network making a decision about a random pool of nodes that provide blinding factors for particleizing your data, and then that random pool of nodes also participating in the calculation. How do we pick this random pool? Of course, random, it's going to be pseudo-random. Sorry, I mean, correct that. The node health score is going to be a factor there. Making sure that we have enough nodes in different, whether it's geographies, time zones, there might be performance aspects to that, different ownership, which are things that we might or might not know. I think, given that a given computation can be correct, if at least 2/3 of the nodes are correct, I don't see a reason why the brain, for lack of a better term, that is selecting these pools of nodes for computation could not throw a couple of permissionless nodes into sort of every computation group. Sorry, we're working on terminology for all these things. We're inventing the airplane, or we're building the airplane as we fly it. But and those couple of nodes that are completely permissionless, that we don't necessarily know anything else, they could then have a chance to start building a node health score, even though they don't have like a DAO service score yet and haven't been actually permitted onto the network. By doing something like this, treating it more sort of as a spectrum between 0 node health score and like some node health score, or zero DAO service score, meaning we don't know anything about them, versus some DAO service score where maybe we know more information about that person. Yeah, it's possible we could build a system that slowly over time will allow more and more permissionless nodes to get onto the network. What really will help us here, and this is funny, in the Uber days, we used to always say more cars in like the chat rooms, because basically all of our pickup times, dispatch statistics, everything got better when there were just more cars on the road. It was a better system for everybody, including the drivers. There were more customers, less time to pick up. I think this similar dynamic is going to play out as we build a Nillion network. The more nodes that we have with more owners means we have a greater pool of options to create these like blinding factor groups, which are going to correspond to given functions. And in this way, we get security, ITS security in two different aspects. One, if that pool selection mechanism, we have so many different options there, a bad actor would need to know, well, what was the grouping of pools given for any given function? That's one stage of security. And then the other stage is, well, once the bad actor knows what that random pool was, which is already a difficult enough problem, they would then need to have access to at least 1/3 of those nodes in there, right? Yeah, I think this is going to be a game of numbers. The more traction we can get from a product perspective means the more data we're processing in the network, means the more nodes that we need. The more nodes that we need means that we can have greater distributed ownership. The greater distributed ownership means it'll be easier to start integrating people in this permissionless way. So I think, even though, for the near term, next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know how many years, it's going to feel like the system is more permissioned. I think everything that we're thinking about developing now in terms of like these node health scores and these DAO service scores and whatnot, we're building them and we're thinking about how these could be used to transition us towards permissionless over time. Because I do think like having this vision of a decentralized pool of private compute in a permissionless way or like with sort of a permissionless network that does that, that's the future. That's why I'm really excited to be building this.
Yeah, speaking of your excitement to building this and all of the clear 0 to 1 innovation that Nillion is, there's 2 questions that kind of lead on to that I'll ask you now. Someone's asked, can you give more details about why you decided to come out of an early retirement to join Nillion? And someone else has said that something that we always talk about internally as well as in the community as well is because it's such a 0 to 1 innovation, we obviously attract a lot of developers. And I got a direct message before saying, I am a developer and I'm looking to get more involved professionally in the Web3 space. What are some steps that I can take to get hired by Nillion? What kind of roles are you looking for at the moment? And can you expect more roles to open up in the future? I'm not a senior developer by any stretch, but I'd love to get involved in the future if possible.
Great. I guess I'll talk about myself first. Why I decided to come out of early retirement. I mean, there's a whole number of things here. I'm 44 now. In my entire life, I've been watching new technology come along, whether it was the computer I got when I was 10, the smartphone I got when I was like 6, or no, the normal cell phone I got when I was 15, the smartphone I got when I was like 27, the internet coming somewhere along there. I got an email address when I went to college. I've been watching all these technologies come along and like changing our culture, like the mainstream culture and like individual culture. And like, it's just like watching the change to society that's been happening because of technological evolution has been amazing. It seems to me now with, the blockchain and this sort of decentralized ethos, this is the first time that culture, we have like a number of people who are growing up, with all these technologies around them. They haven't seen a change, but this is the first time that I think culture is really starting to drive a direction in technology. And that just fascinates me. So I think that's really interesting. Then when I think about so that's like a cultural reason for me to be into it. From a career perspective, I think, given the first startup I worked at in Calgary back in the day at Accelaware, we were implementing algorithms on GPUs. And it was very fascinating to watch. We built a library backend that then we basically put into a competitive market space. And, in no time at all, whoever adopted our library was now 30x faster than all their competitors because we were implementing Maxwell's equations, which, as I said earlier, basic math, you can't cheat the math, you can just do it faster. But all of a sudden that meant that the entire competitive landscape changed like in an instant as soon as we had our first partner. And that means we were able to put our library into the other players within the competitive space. So watching that business transformation is one thing. Fast forward to my time at Uber, watching the smartphone. So all of a sudden we have a smartphone and it solves all these problems that like the taxi market sort of have. It completely transformed, the business space, right? And all these, taxi drivers in a lot of markets were always clamoring for a central dispatch. Taxi companies, medallion owners typically were against having a centralized dispatch because the inefficiency served them. All of a sudden, Uber came along and it became transportation just became a priority for the customer, which I think was like pretty amazing. With Nillion, I think I'm very fascinated to watch how the product initiatives are going to unfold in this company. There's so many incredible ideas. And I think like the decentral, the world I envision in the future, I've been saying this for a while now, is right now, if I was to start a new technology startup, I'd pick Ruby on Rails. Maybe I would have either MySQL or Postgres as my database. I would pick, RabbitMQ, perhaps some AWS functions, S3 for long-term storage. These are all centralized services and they all they all function as very specific but important parts of like that technology startup, that app or web application, whatever. In the future, I think there could be a series of decentralized networks that are all performing different functions within the product, and they're all going to be mediated by tokens. So, the blockchain is going to be behind there, which is just like for ordering and transactions of the token space. That maybe the tokens will be used then to fire off private compute done within a decentralized network. Maybe there'll be a bit more public, decentralized network. Maybe it's a bit more efficient than Ethereum. Perhaps, there'll be like a decentralized processing queue for jobs. Again, that you use tokens to sort of pay from. So I think we're kind of moving into a much more science fiction-y future. Like maybe not like the Matrix or the, Neuromancer, that sort of future where compute is just something that we're sort of swimming in. And yeah, as Charlie said, I love science fiction. So that's probably the biggest reason this has drawn me out of retirement, is like the chance to build that future with amazing people on a really compelling product. Regarding amazing people, we're hiring, of course. I think right now we've been really focused on, filling out the core senior levels of our team. Building an NMC network like Nillion is going to be an incredibly complex thing. We need so many people that know so much stuff. We need expertise in the security side. We need expertise on the distributed computing side. We're going to need a little bit of expertise on the product side, both within, the showcase products we're developing internally to sort of demonstrate the technology, both to ourselves, to our investors, to partners, and so on, but also within the companies that we want to launch alongside, like the network. We're definitely hiring. I don't know the link. I think it's like on Workable.
It is. It's
where all of our there is a Workable link with all our job postings. I would say keep looking there. At some point, by the end of this year, we're definitely going to be hiring mid-level and junior level programmers, because we've got like some pretty amazing experienced talent that's getting onboarded right now. And once they've kind of like understand what it is we're building, I'm still working through the white paper myself. It's quite complex, but once we have a good handle on what we need to build and how, then it's going to be actually really fun to bring on like people who are just like excited and have that energy and want to learn more. I've seen it enough time at startups that often you hire junior people, and within 2 or 3 years, they become the most important people at your company because they've got the enthusiasm to get in there, learn about everything, and get really excited about the technology and making it work better. So I would say keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on that page and be ready to apply. We'd love to talk to you at that time.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's great to see everyone expanding and the team expanding. I remember when I joined, it was only 8 people in our calls every week. So it was very small at the time. And as we are hiring, we can start to lean on the sci-fi and maybe do a comprehensive of Neil Stephenson's Cryptonomicon as a test for hiring.
I like that.
But as it is obvious that we're very community facing, we do get a lot of questions about the community. And one of them is from crypto geologist who says, what exactly does it mean when we say as a team that we are community first? Could we expand on this? How will we go about building a strong, loyal, and passionate community?
So I think this is one of the areas we've been incredibly strong with, and it's like very cool to see this. I mean, I think the enthusiasm for the technology is amazing. This goes back to why my thoughts about culture driving technology. So being able to capture this is super important. How do we go about doing this? Obviously, these Ask Me Anythings, keeping you guys up to date first on what we're developing, what we're working on, the problems we're seeing, the products we're excited about. That's obviously a hugely important thing. The idea I had, which I'm like super excited to do, is when we get to that point where we have on our pathway to permissionless, when we get to the point where we have a permission network where maybe Cambridge University has a node, Binance has a node, so, maybe I don't even know, but we have all these sort of partners who have nodes. I'm excited for us to have a couple of nodes that perhaps the community can be in on shared ownership so that they can participate in the development of the network. Maybe that sort of model might expand, although I think there's definitely some problems with it. But that might be, that might be a good way to get people into the actual like running of the code and seeing what's going on and understanding what the earnings model is like and the node health scores. And obviously, the more people that get their eyes on something to give us feedback, especially when we're in sort of alpha beta stage and we can actually still change things before we get to full mainnet, the more exciting that is, or the more valuable that is for us to get feedback, because it's just like more eyes on the code, right? I think this will also be probably a good time when we're going to start maybe give open source looks on the code. It's not, that's not for sure yet, but that might be a good time to just get the community to get in there and see what it is we've been actually building. Maybe sort of run it in that way I was describing before, where they don't really have the permission to be on the full network right away, but they might have a chance to sort of earn their way into it or something like that. But yeah, I'm just very excited to make sure that the community gets to be part of the network at all stages of its development.
That's fantastic. I'm very much excited for that part. It's going to be lots of fun running it inside our community. And speaking of them, we're going to start bringing some of them up onto the stage, if that's okay, to ask their questions to you directly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I've invited. There you go. I have invited someone up now. Hi, Jesse.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, great. First of all, thank you for taking the time. It's quite lovely to hear you guys talk about Nillion. And my question would be, what initial use cases are you going to build out in order to attract users? And why did you choose them?
Yeah, for sure. So this is something we talk about quite a lot. I would say our primary criteria for deciding which use cases to target has to do with the technological sophistication and development of the network. So our very first use case will be a very simple storage use case, for storing or transferring small pieces of data, getting our authentication working, our authorization. These are like hugely complex algorithms because they have to be written within NMC. So this gives us an opportunity to start build on those. And I think after that, we'll be looking at more sort of compute use cases. One that's coming along pretty soon will be like a wallet concept where we could do transaction signing. I think this could be interesting as a sort of backend. Let's see here. I've got a spreadsheet with these. Yeah, another internal use case that will probably come after storage will be something to compare us with machine learning protocols. So we basically would like to compare how much faster are we than homomorphic encryption, all that sort of stuff. Okay, here we go, just found it. KYC is obviously, this is a huge one for, I think this will be our first sort of external facing product. The first two things I talked about, those are more sort of internal facing ones. I think like password storage might be one of our launch products, a KYC product. So this is something that's like already currently missing from like the decentralized world. So this will be a big part of integrating the decentralized DeFi world with, the centralized world, which has centralized versions of KYC. I think a crypto wallet, or a wallet backend, something where you can build, or you can basically upload your keys, sign transactions, delegate the signing of transactions. I think these things are cool. Biograph. So this is the idea here is adding more authentication methods. So even though we can be doing simple single-factor passwordless auth, adding in facial recognition or a thumbprint authorization, or even like or thumbprint authentication, even adding in an authentication based on some sort of network things. These are all computational processes. So I think a document signing product that's using these would be quite interesting. I think that's what we're kind of looking forward to in the next couple of years. Beyond that, there's tons of ideas, sort of fun things. I think like DAO execution environments that are fully private. So you could be part of a DAO with people that you don't necessarily know, running code that is only known amongst you, but not externally, could be very cool. Private smart contract execution. I think it's going to be really interesting. But yeah, the first use cases are primarily driven by us trying to figure out what like how the network is going to behave and perform both at a smaller scale and as we scale it up.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Jesse. Let's bring someone else up. There you go. I've invited you up now, Abisian. Hello.
Hey, great. Thanks, man. How you doing?
I'm good, man.
Thanks for being here, Conrad. So yeah, I guess you kind of touched on the initial use cases. I personally have, a big interest in seeing how Nillion can change the way that we store and share our healthcare data. I'm sure this is something the team has thought about, but when I look at kind of an issue like healthcare, it's a system that's just so like messed up, especially in the US, that it's difficult to introduce any sort of, I guess, innovation without being met with some, I guess, opposition. So I was just wondering, if the safety and security things that Nillion is projecting play out, and we see that maybe the main roadblocks to adoption in healthcare would be government policy and maybe even like existing electronic healthcare companies or record companies. Do we think that there's a way that Nillion could incentivize the adoption of your decentralized network kind of as a layer zero of sorts for electronic health data?
I mean, I think electronic health data is just such a thorny problem. It has been, in so many markets and geographies for so many years. As far as how to incentivize it, that I'm not sure. I think that is probably going to have to come from the product side of things. I think what's going to be interesting, speaking about medical health records, is the accreditation that's going to have to get done for the NMC network. So there's going to be a phase of time where nobody might, even though our paper says that we guarantee the compliance, we're going to need auditing, and we're going to have to probably go through a whole process by which people would start using something like Nillion for electronic health data. Where I think it could be interesting for us is if we can take the mindset of instead of us being like, I'm just gonna riff on this idea here, but like instead of us being like that application layer that we're building on, perhaps we are like a storage layer for electronic health data that's fully private, but then maybe the transformation we could do into any number of systems could be quite interesting. So maybe there's a process by which we could just do sort of that storage layer. On the incentivized side, if the network grows and the token gains value, perhaps that's, something that we would be able to use that token to basically incentivize the opening of like a whole new market or like a new type of product, perhaps with a partnership with somebody, or perhaps it's something we build ourselves. I don't actually really know. But I think all the pieces are there, for us to basically allow people who currently own health records, for them to actually use our system, without us necessarily being involved or knowing anything about it. So if we can convince people of the security guarantees that we're giving, and perhaps there's like functions or transformations that are simple enough to start with, that might be the beginning of incentive for people to at least play with this. I think if you're using like a normal database, you have to, if I want to put my health records in your database, I have to have some sort of legal agreement with you, which is just such a barrier. If we can sort of bypass that, that's, I think, going to be helpful from a technology perspective, at least in, transitioning that type of data to a system like Nillion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a tough topic and something I was just, curious about. I also, if it's all right, I have one more question kind of focused on healthcare research. You kind of touched on it earlier, and I was wondering if Nillion has anyone on the team who's currently, reaching out to institutions that are engaged in clinical research, because I feel like I may know some people at some institutions that run AI centers that would be really interested in talking with the team about, potential collaborations.
Yeah, I think this is not something we specifically staff for in our team yet, but I think as we build out our ecosystem, we're going to need a person like that, because for me, I think this is one of the most compelling things is just the generalized shared collaborative compute on scientific data, whether for medical research or for other things. I have experience with companies that are collecting data, from devices, patient data, usually within a clinical trial context. And when they want to, work with, whether it's a pharmaceutical or somebody else that's also providing data, it's usually just such a roadblock in figuring out how to navigate the legal landscape and how to deal with the data. And I think if we could find projects that would be down to use Nillion and NMC from the get-go, and then promise collaboration with other people, but they would also have to use NMC to get there. I mean, that could be a really interesting vector for us to just grow the network. And like I was saying, as we grow the network, there's going to be a whole lot of things from both our security guarantees, as well as the randomness we need within the node selection in the network to, will just make it all better.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I think a lot of the limiting factors for some of these institutions is that they just don't have access to the computing power. So I think this could be really, really interesting for them.
Yeah.
Anyway,
sure.
Great. This was awesome. Thank you guys so much. And yeah, I wish you guys the best of luck.
Thank you.
You're getting some of the real heavy hitting questions today, which are really good because they make you think.
I like it. Yeah.
We're inviting someone else up. Chico has been invited up now. Just wait for him to join us up on stage. Hi, how's it going?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great, thanks for doing this. So my question is on security. So when assets are explicitly priced, like a financial asset with an explicit dollar value, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, the network has an idea of what kinds of fees it needs to charge to lock that value up so that it can accrue enough value to the staked token, in this case nil, to keep the network over collateralized. That's the case in an economic security model, which seems to be what Nillion is pursuing. So my question is, there's a plethora of these fairly arbitrary use cases on the website that concern a lot of sensitive data that cannot be explicitly priced, like a financial asset, like corporate secrets, banking information, databases, etc. So, for example, if $1 billion worth of this sensitive data were locked up, but the network didn't know how much to charge because it doesn't know what kind of value is getting locked up, and only say a few $1,000s or tens of thousands were paid to lock this data up, then there wouldn't necessarily be enough value accruing to the nil token to disincentivize nodes from colluding to steal it. So my question is, how do you plan to secure this arbitrary sensitive data that cannot be explicitly priced?
That's very interesting. I mean, I think, yeah, this is fundamentally the way the network is being built is Nillion or anybody participating in the network will actually really have no idea, what that data is actually worth. Obviously, the person or the organization putting that data in the network will know that. I think it's possible we're going to have tunable levels of security guarantees. So perhaps the pool of blinding factors, we really need to come up with a term for that. I'll work on that. But so the pool of nodes that are contributing blinding factors towards your particle masking operation, that might be something that we will allow the user to specify the number of nodes that they want, or perhaps like a security level guarantee, such that if you were wanting to store private keys that controlled billions of dollars in the network, perhaps you might want blinding factors from thousands of nodes versus just hundreds, say, and that would be something that we would sort of hint to the user as well. Yeah, we do have some work to do to basically define what sort of the security looks like for those different levels. But yeah, this is actually, a really good question, because I think, we're working on the assumption that the ITS security will help all. But I think, the nice thing about a network like this is we can actually increase the security guarantee by increasing the number of nodes that are participating. So I think the way we solve the problem that you're talking about, assuming something else doesn't come along, would be to sort of make that tunable or selectable when the person is collecting blinding factors to mask their data.
Well, so if the assumption is to increase security, you increase the number of nodes. Well, I think it's safe to assume that if someone owns a third of the network, the probability of them being randomly sampled into, let's call it a shard or some subgroup of nodes, they would still very roughly have to own the same percentage of the network, regardless of how many total nodes were on the network, right? So you might make that more expensive to do if you increase the number of nodes, but regardless of the size of each shard or subnet or subgroup, you'd still have to own the same percentage of the network. So I think the security would have to come from trying to accrue enough value to the nil token to make, to make that prohibitively expensive for any adversary to own that percentage of the network.
Yeah, that's an aspect as well. I mean, the amount of staking that would need to be done, and we're talking about the nodes. So if you own 1/3 of the nodes, and you would need to stake 1/3 of those in order to be selected within the sort of smaller pool. So the amount of money that would cost, yes, the nil token accruing value would also be preventative, from somebody being able to be participating in sort of that much as well. So yeah, that's another approach as well. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, it sounds like it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be working on this for years. But I think it's, one thing to think about is if we get our product strategy right, if we get the right amount of data sort of flowing through this, and we're talking about tens of thousands of nodes or hundreds of thousands of nodes, but you need 1,000 nodes within there. I mean, there starts to become a point where owning 1/3 of the network will actually become really difficult, or no, it'll become quite expensive, of course. And we might be able to, know, the pool by which you're pulling blinding factors could be composed almost entirely of other nodes at certain times, where the ownership is more distributed, right? There's going to have to be a lot of work done in this sort of area. I think this is some of the DAO service score stuff I was talking about earlier. So that's why, a fully permissionless implementation of NFC right out of the gate is actually going to be quite difficult. I think in the original white paper, this is why we were looking at, the full light node the full node versus light node. That's one conceptualization of how we can do this, where the full nodes are permissioned, the light nodes are not. I think there might be some sort of a middle ground, but I don't think, at least for the time being, you will, if you say, give me 1,000 nodes to do a computation, that you're going to be getting, the majority of those from a permissionless grouping. I think, it'll have to be, at least 80% or something permission, and then the other small group of permissionless ones where the ownership can be sort of aggregated, like you're saying.
Okay, that makes some sense.
Thank you, Chico. Okay, we might have time for one more question, so I'll bring up someone up.
Yeah, great questions.
There we go. You've been invited up onto the stage. Hello.
Okay, so linking to a previous speaker, apart from trust-based security in Nillion, are there any other mechanisms that would prohibit people from colluding and possibly leaking secrets and stealing information?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think the entire thing is based on the premise, if you get blinding factors from the decentralized ownership, the nodes that have decentralized ownership, then none of those owners would have to collude to at least 1/3 to be able to
to uncover your secret, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's like the math. That's the mathematics of ITS. So even if they have 20%, you know, they just fundamentally can't. No matter what, there's not enough information that they could ever get to reconstruct the secret. There's just too much missing, right?
Yeah, but I'm wondering if it might be possible to have like an additional layer of security apart from the trust needed. So even if you do have like a third of all the different particles, you might have an extra layer.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you could put your data. Yeah, you could encrypt your data and put it in there if it was just for storage. You could encrypt your data, but then the decryption would be, let's say you wanted to do a computation on something, then the decryption would become part of the cost for doing the computation, so it would be more expensive. Yeah, you know, there might be. I'm really interested as we build the platform out to see what kind of approaches people are using to become even more secure, sort of in that regard, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we might touch up time for more, so that was a nice quick one. So it'd be Dark Matter, you've been invited up onto the stage. Hello, I think your mic's muted.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my question. Whenever I explain the Nillion concept to IT people, it seems their main concerns are always centered around data redundancy and backup. Because today they are used to take a snapshot of a database and doing additional redundancy service. And I think this is a very important point to convince those IT people to trust such a new system. And I just want to hear your opinion. Yeah, what's your best approach to resolve those concerns? And will there be some kind of indicators or dashboards to monitor, let's say, the how many required nodes are active for this network security feature?
Yeah, no, for sure. This is a really good question. So I think obviously our product roadmap is we want to launch entirely new product. This type of network is like a totally new, it's a totally new type of concept, from, you know, binding the consensus to the data, being able to do the shared collaborative computing on private data, but at a faster speed than sort of traditional SMPC. So obviously we're going to be launching products that are just going to, from the beginning, you know, be able to try and take advantage of this network. For the situations that you're talking about, which is integrating this into already established products. Well, the interesting thing about the particles, like I said earlier, is the particles are totally portable. So if you particleize your data, you could basically back them up in whatever way you want. Somebody else could back them up, you know, unless they get access to the blinding factors, they can't actually sort of reconstruct it. But you're right, on the blinding factor side of things, the network and how it provides blinding factors and how it maintains consistency and be able to apply those blinding factors or provide those blinding factors into the future is something that we're going to have to work on. You know, in the white paper, we've talked about a sharded approach. So if some part of the network goes down, other parts of the network will be able to sort of provide the blinding factors, you know, for any given computation to run. It's possible in the early days, we won't allow for a long time to elapse between when a piece of data is stored and, you know, or when a piece of data is masked using blinding factors, and then when it's computed, we might actually, for at least early conceptions of the network, keep that time frame very limited so that we don't expose ourselves to having to back up these blinding factors for a long time. I think it's, you know, for established applications, again, it's going to be about us getting the word out, getting the technology built, using the community and all these channels for like spreading the word, having audits done on our technology for specific applications. You know, once we get into the more
biz dev aspect of, you know, product development, which will be coming but probably years down the line. You know, I think that's going to be the thing, is the active engagement with IT professionals to ensure them that what we're building does what it says what it should do based on what we say it should do.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for the detailed answer. And I think the community can bring also a big benefit here, to spread the word and also to give you feedback. Because I think there are many different use cases, thousands of different applications that will fit into this NMC concept. And I think the community feedback would be also a very helpful tool to adjust also the way how we approach the market, and also which documentations or development kits or whatever is required to have a quick and safe onboarding.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be what I'm really excited for is just, you know, I hear about new ideas that could use this type of paradigm for decentralized computing all the time. And like, it's like, man, that's freaking cool. I never thought about it. You know, I met a lawyer and he was like, wow, for legal search, there's like, this is an incredible, you know, there's so many possibilities here. And I think with our active community and keeping them very engaged, you know, the ideas that are going to come out, I think are going to be super fascinating. And it'll be really cool, probably in a couple of years, once we sort of have our testnet is up and running, we like understand the system a lot more. If some of those ideas bubble up from the community and we're just like, hey, we're going to just create this function and see if maybe you could do something with it, you know? So I think, community engagement is going to be a very important part of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All the best.
Fantastic. That was the last question. We're coming up to the end of the hour. I'd just like to say thank you to you, Conrad, for taking the time to do this. I know everyone will massively appreciate it. And obviously a big thank you to everyone that has came out and showed up or is watching it at a later date. It's continually mind-blowing to see every month just how much people are understanding the project, understanding what we're trying to build, and then thinking already about what they can build on top of it, even though that is, you know, years down the line. It's truly exciting to see.
Yeah, super exciting time. I'm excited to hear more from the community as we go. I'm excited to get the community engaged. I'm excited to get a community node up there as we're following our pathway to a permissionless environment someday. And I'm just excited to be on the adventure with you guys.
Again, thank you so much, Conrad. I'm going to close this stage off now. I'd like to thank everyone again for coming. We'll be doing another one next month, so keep an eye out for when we start to release the dates about that. But thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.